Thank you everyone for coming today to learn more about elder abuse. Welcome to Understanding and Addressing Elder Abuse. That's the topic today. I'm Michelle Rogers. I'm the Community Outreach and Education Manager at the Camarillo Health Care District. Please allow me to introduce our panelists, and then we'll get started with our panel discussion. So welcome. Carey Aldava is a program manager of Ventura County Adult Protective Services. Carey has a master's in gerontology and has 24 years experience in social work. She enjoys working with elders and is passionate about educating the community on elder abuse and its prevention. She would like to continue making strides in the field to eliminate elder abuse, as well as contribute to public policies that strengthen existing elder abuse laws. Carey brings this energy and experience to the professional development of her program and staff. She believes that the wisdom that can be gleaned from elders is priceless in helping to advance the next generation, and one of the greatest honors in life is to give back to vulnerable elders in the community by providing a voice for those who cannot speak for themselves. So welcome, Carey.
Thank you.
Then we also have Alexa Leibel. She's the Elder and Dependent Adult Abuse Prosecutor with the Ventura County District Attorney's Office. She reviews, files, and prosecutes the majority of cases involving elder and dependent adult victims. Her caseload involves a wide range of crimes, including but not limited to attempted murder, fraud, theft, neglect, physical abuse, and restraining order violations. She previously handled domestic violence, child abuse, general felony, and misdemeanor cases. Alexis has been a prosecutor for 7 years and conducted 31 jury trials involving a variety of crimes, including vehicular manslaughter, domestic violence, child and elder abuse, stalking, drugs, and driving under the influence. She has authored and co-authored 7 publications for the California District Attorneys Association involving topics including prosecuting sex offenders, motions to suppress, diversions, and domestic violence probation teams, among others. So let's get started with our panel questions. So, welcome. Okay, so this is sort of a 4-pronged question. Can each of you please describe the organization you work for? We'll start with that first.
Okay, go ahead.
So I work for the County of Ventura Human Services Agency and, of course, the Adult Protective Services Program. We're responsible for investigating all of the elder and dependent adult abuse that happens in the county. Some of you may not be aware in the audience that last year in January, the age of an elder for Adult Protective Services changed. It was lowered from 65 to 60 years old. I don't know about you, as I get a little bit older myself, 60 seems awfully young, but there were a lot of reasons why the state decided to do that. One being they wanted to give adult protective services programs in California an opportunity to get involved sooner so that maybe they could make a difference ahead of time and hopefully have a better outcome for elders. And also a lot of aging programs across the country, the federal age is 60, and so that was kind of more in alignment with that. So now a dependent adult for adult protective services is an adult between the ages of 18 and 59. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term dependent adult, it simply means an adult with a disability that where the disability prevents them from caring for themselves or from making decisions. So part of our investigation when we're going out into the communities to investigate reports of abuse, we're also looking at ways to link clients to needed services to kind of remedy the abuse. So our social workers are going into homes, they're conducting needs assessments of clients, taking a look at their support systems, their disease processes that they might have, like diabetes or high blood pressure, those sorts of things, and then linking them to needed community resources. So Adult Protective Services is really a short-term crisis intervention program. So we have our cases generally open between 30 and 90 days. So our goal is to get in, investigate the abuse, connect them to resources, and close the case because we're always getting new reports of abuse.
Great, thank you.
All right, so the District Attorney's Office, we're the prosecuting agency. So essentially when a crime is committed and law enforcement conducts an investigation, if we think that it's provable in court to the criminal burden of proof, then we'll file a case and we'll prosecute it. But we actually do a lot of other things. First, I should distinguish that we serve the citizens of Ventura County. A common misconception is that we represent the victim. While we do represent the victim's interests, we don't represent a specific person. and we represent the citizens. So sometimes victims will hire their own attorneys to file civil lawsuits. We just deal with criminal cases. We prosecute people for committing crimes within the county. So, for example, if somebody from LA County came over into Ventura County, committed a crime here, and then went back home, that's someone that we could still prosecute if the crime is provable. So essentially our office is made up of kind of 3 different areas. We've got the district attorneys, that's what I do. We've got our victim advocates, and we've got our district attorney investigators. So just to start with the district attorney investigators, because I can get them out of the way pretty quickly, they are all sworn law enforcement officers. They are all very experienced. They start their careers in a law enforcement agency, and after spending a lot of time with those law enforcement agencies, if they decide they want to shift in job duties, they'll apply to our office. It's very competitive for them, so we only take the best of the best. And our DA investigators are involved usually at investigation once a case has been filed. Sometimes they assist with the heavier cases. For example, each of our homicide attorneys have a DA investigator to help. Some of our serious sex crimes attorneys have DA investigators specifically assigned to them. They also help with security-related issues in our office. Victim advocates, our victim advocate unit is just incredible. I can't begin to say enough good things about them. Our victim advocates are so wonderful because they help the victims through the process. When a criminal case is filed, often victims don't know what to do. They've never been in the system before. They have to come into court, they need resources, and they can't get paid back for any injuries, any bills that they have until the case is closed, essentially. So our victim advocates step in and they help the victims kind of navigate the system, connect them with different services within the community to fill those gaps. For example, if a restraining order violation was committed and the victim is worried that the perpetrator, the defendant, might come back to the house and they want to buy surveillance cameras. The victim advocate can connect that victim with resources. The one I'm thinking of specifically is a state-funded service where they will fund those video surveillance cameras so that victim can have peace of mind while the case is proceeding. So that's one thing they do. They actually also help victims when cases haven't been filed. Sometimes there'll be a crime report, police will take a report, we get the report to review, and we decide, even though maybe we believe the victim, there isn't enough for us to prove that case in court. So unfortunately, a lot of the times we have to reject filing criminal charges. In those circumstances, our victim advocates can still help. They can still help connect those victims with services, create safety plans, that kind of thing. The other thing is our victim advocates staff the Family Justice Center, and that's kind of like a one-stop shop for victims to go and get all different kinds of services, be connected to different services and also different legal services. For example, we have legal aid attorneys there to help them with civil-related matters that our office doesn't deal with. And when I say civil-related matters, that's, for example, child custody, probate, conservatorship, those kinds of things. And then lastly, the district attorneys. So what we do is we take in police reports. We review those police reports once an investigation has been completed, and we decide, is there a provable crime here? To do that, we look at all the facts of the case, we look at the law, and we decide if there's enough evidence to prove it to a jury of 12 people beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest burden of proof. If there is enough, then we file a criminal case, and we see that case through from filing, prosecution, conviction, and even post-conviction issues. So that's essentially what we do.
Great, thank you. What is considered elder abuse? Can you give me some examples?
So we investigate a lot. There's a penal code that I'll let Alexa speak about. She'll speak to that a little bit, but we investigate lots of different types of abuse, almost anything you could think of that would be against an elderly person. So some common ones that we investigate are physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect by a caregiver. Self-neglect is a big one, actually. Financial abuse, and that can take many different forms, from scams to illegitimate transfers of property, things like that. Psychological abuse, or maybe the suspected abuser is causing the victim or the client a sustained level of duress. Maybe they're intimidating them. If you don't sign this car for me, I'm going to put you in a nursing home. And so they're feeling like they're under duress and they have to make a decision, or else they'll have a consequence, if you will. So those are the common types of abuse that we investigate against elders.
And our office our office kind of mirrors that. And one thing I should note is while the age has been lowered for purposes of APS, the Penal Code, really essentially the law that enumerates crimes against elderly people, it stays at 65. That hasn't been changed. So if we have a child committing physical abuse against a parent, if that parent is 62, in our office that falls under domestic violence rather than elder abuse. So the age is still 65 for us. Everyone under 65, I'll handle their cases if they're dependent adults. In other words, if they're disabled in some way. In terms of what I see as elder abuse, it can be anything. We do have one crime that Carey mentioned that's specifically labeled elder abuse. That's Penal Code 368. And that law really was designed to acknowledge the vulnerability of elderly people and dependent adults. We call it elder abuse, but it actually encompasses both. And there's actually a specific subsection within that penal code that talks about the legislative intent. And essentially what it says is, we've made this law because this population is so vulnerable, we want to give them heightened protections. So it's nice that the legislature gives us that extra tool to help protect the population. So we can file criminal charges involving physical elder abuse, mental distress, financial abuse, there's even a specific section for false imprisonment of elders. But elder abuse can encompass anything. For example, trespassing. A trespassing case can be elder abuse if the victim is elderly. Restraining order violations, that can be elder abuse if the victim is over 65. Even attempt murder, that can be elder abuse if it's specifically committed against an elderly person. So it can be anything.
Great, thank you, Alexa. All right, can each of you share a little bit about what made you personally choose to serve the adult population in this capacity?
Sure. For me, both sets of grandparents were really involved in my life. So when I had the opportunity, I worked 4 years in LA County. I was just drawn to the job because of the importance of my grandparents in my life. So I worked 4 years in LA County, and then I've worked 17 years in adult protective services here in Ventura County, and it's my calling. I feel like it's a calling for me. So I intend to keep working the rest of my career with adults. So.
For me, I just keep thinking back to the second half of Carey's bio. I think that explains why I chose to do elder abuse so well. I couldn't have put it better myself. I actually never thought that I would be working in elder abuse. I didn't really see that as an option when I went into my office. But when I was in the domestic violence unit, the opportunity presented itself to me, and I jumped on it because it's such a great opportunity to focus on a specialized area and really make a tangible impact where so often you just don't see positive outcomes. So I feel like in my job, I'm able to help people get those tangible positive outcomes. I think also personally, I have a family member with special needs, and so I see just how vulnerable that population is and how much they need strong advocates to see everything through from the beginning to the end, and also even help them with prevention, help them avoid being re-victimized, or even holding offenders responsible so that they don't re-victimize similar situated people.
Great, thank you. For our understanding, can you discuss what it means to be a mandated reporter and who mandated reporters are?
Sure, and Alexa can definitely add whatever I may leave out in my definition. To kind of boil it down to the simplest parts, it's really somebody who's working in the capacity of a care custodian for an older adult. So whether they're paid or unpaid, somebody who's working to either provide care to an older adult or somebody who in their primary role is working with an elder or dependent adult. So for us, common ones that we see are medical professionals, doctors, nurses, home health agencies, law enforcement agencies are mandated reporters, any county employee is a mandated reporter. Let's see. What else? Clergy, surprisingly, you may not have maybe thought of them, except for the Catholic Church because of the sanctity of confession. So clergy meaning, maybe evangelical or non-denominational clergy members. I actually learned that one myself a few years ago. I wasn't aware of that, and someone brought me up to speed, so I appreciated that. Those are the common ones that we see as far as a mandated reporter. So what that means is that you just have the mandate to make the report to APS. You don't have to have physical evidence that the crime happened. You can be told secondhand, third hand. You don't have to have witnessed it personally. You just feel like this story sounds, pretty credible, and I'm going to make this report. What's important to know about being a mandated reporter is that your identity is protected under the law, so it's confidential. So we see your name when we get the report, but we'll never divulge the name unless we're ordered to do so by the court.
I don't have much to add. I was just going to say it's actually in a welfare and institution code, so essentially in a law, they list all the mandated reporters. And for anyone who's interested, it's Welfare and Institutions Code, section 15630. That's all.
Great, thank you. All right, can you please elaborate on how the pandemic and shifting demographics with the increase in aging population has impacted the rates of elder abuse, either increased, decreased, or stayed the same?
So there's definitely been an increase. We're on pace to maybe double what we had last year, probably. So unfortunately, it's on the rise. We had twice as many reports of elder abuse last year as Child Protective Services did for children. So I think that actually speaks volumes right there. And half the staff, I might add, but I digress. What we noticed after post-pandemic is the impact that isolation and the delay of medical care had on older adults. So a lot of the clients that we see, they're not very computer savvy, not all, but some, and so they didn't feel comfortable doing telehealth visits, or maybe that didn't really meet their needs and their healthcare needs, and so a lot of our clients just delayed care, and so we're seeing the results of that now. We're seeing a lot more medical devastation for our clients. So maybe they had mild diabetes, now it's like moderate to severe range because they weren't taking care of it, maybe not understanding how to take their medication or not taking any medication at all. So whereas financial abuse was the #1 reported type of elder abuse in our county for maybe almost a decade, the last couple of years it's been self-neglect, and I feel the primary reason is it's really due to the impact of the pandemic on our client population.
Carey mentioned neglect, I think, and also lack of access to medical care. I think that has caused a lot of neglect because, one, caregivers can't necessarily connect elderly people with the care that they need. Another piece of it is a lot of people don't want to go back to work. And so during the COVID pandemic and now afterwards, we're seeing a lot less people willing to care for elders when there's such a need for caregivers. And so it's hard to get elderly people the proper care that they need unless they're in a really great care facility or they have a family member who wants to care for them. Another piece of it that I see is issues that we see among offenders. And what I mean by that is during the pandemic, a lot of people weren't able to access mental health services. And we saw a lot of cases, a lot of conduct, mainly physical abuse, that stemmed from untreated mental health issues, sometimes that were exacerbated, actually a lot of the time, that were exacerbated by drug use. So we see a lot of situations where people who probably could have received care and progressed in a positive direction, they actually regressed. They used drugs in some cases, and they turned to physical abuse and victimized their parents.
All right, thank you. I suspect for many that the topic of elder abuse is uncomfortable. What steps or should someone take if they think someone is being abused?
I would always recommend having that conversation in private. So for a lot of the clients that we see, first of all, sometimes they fear retaliation by maybe whomever the suspected abuser might be, but also there's a lot of feelings that come with the thought of the fact that they're being abused. Some of it's denial. They can't honestly believe that their loved one would do that to them. Or it could be fear. It could be shame that they're embarrassed to tell somebody their story. So definitely recommend having that conversation in private, and then just pointing out kind of your observations in as an objective way as you can. These are the things that you've noticed. Is this something that they're okay with? Or is this something that they might like some help with? And I know one thing that we see a lot, suspected abusers, they'll kind of often demonize, if you will, Adult Protective Services. They're going to put you in a home. That's what they're here to do. That's definitely not what we're there to do. We don't have any legal authority to put anybody in a home, and nor would that be our ultimate goal for somebody. Our goal is to try and keep adults in their homes whenever possible, if that's what they consider to be the least restrictive environment, which typically the homes are. So we're making every effort to give the clients resources so that they can stay safely, healthy, and independently in their own home. So maybe just having that conversation in a private setting about the things that you've noticed, and this is why you're concerned, and then telling them there is help out there. Agencies like the Area Agency on Aging or Adult Protective Services if they're being abused. Even for self-neglect, a lot of adults don't realize that resources keep them independent. It doesn't mean that they're weak or a failure to take care of their own health. It supports so that they can stay safely and independently in their own homes.
In terms of, I guess, addressing elder abuse, the most important thing from the prosecutor's perspective is reporting. Some people will be frustrated by the process because we might not file a case initially if there isn't enough evidence. And sometimes then they won't want to continue reporting. They won't want to seek out help, and they'll say, oh, the law enforcement, the district attorney's office, they don't want to help us. But the main thing is to continue reporting, to continue encouraging reporting. And over time, that may give us the evidence we need to file a case. One thing I also always recommend is gathering what we call corroborative evidence. So anything that will help support the allegations that are being made. For example, when law enforcement is investigating a case involving fraud, they'll always pull the financial records because they want to see that those financial records support what is being what the person is being accused of. All this missing money, is it being shown in that person's bank records? They'll also always look for video surveillance. That is the best evidence of a crime, and sometimes that can help wrap up a case very quickly and avoid us having to bring in an elderly victim to come in and testify when it's very clearly on video surveillance. So the main things are report everything, gather as much corroborative evidence as you can. Also take preventative steps. Even if you don't think that you can be victimized, make sure you're monitoring your finances. Make sure you have video surveillance cameras set up outside your house. And that way, if God forbid, you fall into that circumstance, you're protected, you have the evidence, and our office can step in and help you. One other aspect that we deal with is victims' reluctance to come into court. And unfortunately, the Constitution gives defendants, people who are charged with crimes, a lot of rights that tend to re-victimize victims. A lot of victims do not want to come into court and testify, but the defendants, the accused, have a constitutional right to confront their accuser. In other words, we need to bring the victims in to say what happened if the defendants, the accused, want to challenge that. They don't want to take responsibility early on and plead guilty to the charges. We sometimes see that. Most of our cases resolve before trial, but a lot of the defendants want to see, is the victim going to come into court? Do they have enough corroborative evidence? And so in those circumstances, our victim advocates are so wonderful in helping these victims through the process, making it as easy as possible for them. And it's just really important for them to recognize, one, it's really important to hold these offenders accountable for what they did, because otherwise they may be emboldened. They may go re-victimize other similarly situated people. And two, no matter how much time passes, it vindicates them to the point where they can get restitution, where they know that they can protect themselves and the system is working. So we always have to remind victims of that, and hopefully that encourages them to be cooperative with the process.
I just want to quickly add on to what Alexa said. One thing, it's sort of the flip side of what you said, is that if you can encourage maybe someone that you know or a loved one who's experiencing abuse to work with Adult Protective Services, because similarly speaking, our clients have the right to say no to our services, that self-determination piece. So while you may know the abuse is happening, and while we, Adult Protective Services, might be convinced that it's happening based on our observation or what we're seeing, our clients have the right to say no. They don't want to work with us. So encouraging the client to work with Adult Protective Services is pretty essential, because if our clients say no, it's really the end of the investigation for us, and it doesn't even get possibly get to Alexa's office. So it really kind of starts with Adult Protective Services and having clients or victims be willing to partner with us to help empower themselves.
Okay. We talked about the reporting process. Can you sort of walk us through that process, what it looks like, and what happens once a report has been made, and how it differs from a report concerning a child?
Okay, sure. So of course our population, like we referenced earlier, we're dealing with somebody over the age of 18. So that's how it differs in terms of we only see adults. We don't see child abuse reports. That's Child Protective Services. But there's a few different ways you can make abuse reports to either Child or Adult Protective Services. The county has a hotline that takes both types of calls. It's the Child and Elder Abuse Hotline, and that number is 805-654 3200. So that's the local number to reach the Elder and Child Abuse Hotline, and they'll take those reports from you. Again, having as much information as possible is very helpful because that really gives the social worker who gets that case a lot of insight. So for example, if you know there's aggressive animals in the home, that's helpful. If you suspect there might be weapons like guns in the home or drugs in the home, it's really important for the social worker's safety to know that because that might inform our response. We might call our law enforcement partners and say, hey, have you been to this home? Have the narcotics unit, have they been to this home? We're wanting to make sure that our social workers are safe and our staff are safe in the field. The other way to report that's relatively new as of last year is that now there's an online way to make reports. So the website is www.reporttaaps.org. And then you have the ability to search by county, and of course you would select Ventura County. I don't think anyone in the room here is a mandated reporter, but if you were, going online satisfies the mandate to call the report in and to send the report in, because if you are a mandated reporter, you have to call as soon as practically possible and then send a written report in within 48 hours of making that phone call for abuse. Going online satisfies both requirements. What happens in a nutshell when the report is made, they're screened by our supervisors. Our social workers have 10 calendar days to respond to that report of abuse. We're going unannounced. We don't call. And as you can imagine, that can be really upsetting to people. They think it's rude. They would have wanted to maybe make themselves look nicer or pick up their home, but that's exactly the reason why we come unannounced, because if the nature of the report is this person's not able to manage their health care or their hygiene, then we want to see them a little bit disheveled. So we know that they're struggling with that. And then it helps us to develop an appropriate service plan for that person. By all means, if the client's really upset by the fact that we came unannounced, we will by all means make an appointment and come back at a time of their choosing. We try to make every effort to give the client the chance to say yes to us coming. If they tell us no in the first visit, then we go at least one more time. We'll tell them, here's our business card, here's our brochure, would you at least think about it? We'll come back sometime next week to give you some time to think it over. We want to give that older adult or that dependent adult every opportunity to appreciate why we're there and to really give it some thought as to whether they would like to at least hear us out and talk to us a little bit. So when we go back the following week, if the older adult or dependent adult is still adamant, no, didn't you get it the first time? I told you I want you to come back. Then we'll respectfully close their case. And really what that means is that they're just not ready to work with us, and we have to respect that. There may be other opportunities down the road, and that often and frequently happens. We may not be able to see someone the first report, but maybe the second or the third time that report comes back to us, we've kind of broken the defenses down a little bit. And they're like, gosh, this person keeps coming around. They must really care about me. I'm going to go ahead and talk to them for a few minutes.
So in terms of cases getting to the district attorney's office, there's kind of two routes that they can get to our office. One, that's when a crime is reported or a suspected crime to Adult Protective Services. So we really heavily rely on Adult Protective Services and the social workers. They do incredible work going out there and helping identify issues and gathering corroborative evidence and getting cases to our office. But if a case is first reported to Adult Protective Services, then law enforcement, the appropriate police agency, will go out and conduct their investigation. That's one way. If law enforcement at that point thinks that there is enough evidence to prove a crime, they'll submit the case to my office. It'll get routed probably to me if it involves elderly people or dependent adults, and then I'll take a look at those reports, all the evidence, and I'll decide whether or not there is a provable crime and either file a case, reject it, or sometimes even return it for more investigation. The other route that I was talking about, that is just when a case is, or potential crime is reported directly to law enforcement. So they just skip the Adult Protective Services step. I will note, though, in those circumstances, law enforcement will conduct an investigation and most often submit the case to us. But they also do what we call cross-reporting. They also want to get Adult Protective Services involved because they can help assist in connecting these people with services that'll kind of fill in the gap while the case is pending, while we're reviewing the case, while there may be more investigation ongoing. So in terms of filing a case, I mentioned earlier, the criminal burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. So for me to file a case ethically, I need to believe that I can prove that case to 12 jurors, 12 people from the community randomly selected, beyond a reasonable doubt, which is, we don't assign numbers to it, but it's really just the highest burden, that you don't have any doubts as to whether or not that person committed that crime. So sometimes in situations where there isn't corroborative evidence, it's just what we call he said, she said, there's no way to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. And so unfortunately we see a lot of that and we can't file that case. Sometimes I'll see a case come in where there's room for further investigation. You know, maybe the neighborhood wasn't canvassed and there was video surveillance from a neighbor's house that could have caught it. And I'll send it back to the law enforcement agency and ask them to go do a little bit more investigation and just make sure that we're not missing something that would make this case provable. And then in other circumstances, when everything is there, which more often than not, law enforcement does an incredible job of gathering what they need and what we need to reach that burden of proof, then I'll file a case. And then we see that case through from filing to preliminary hearings, if it's a felony, sometimes to jury trial, restitution hearings, post-conviction hearings. I'll also note, in terms of filing elder abuse cases, usually on our cases, we have different priorities. And sometimes the priority is putting that offender behind bars for years and years and years to remove them from society. But elder fraud cases are unique because usually the priority is restitution. And so in those circumstances, we'll try and speak with defense attorneys and talk about prioritizing restitution if the defendant, if the accused, will take responsibility early on. And we try and work towards a restitution-focused resolution early on versus separating from someone from society. So we have different goals in different cases.
Great, thank you. How can we as individuals and those representing agencies work to decrease the rates of elder abuse?
I think there's a couple ways from my perspective, and one is to let your elected congresspeople know that older adults should be a priority. Oftentimes they're the least prioritized population. In my many years of experience, I feel like I have the ability to say that. And so making that a budgetary priority and making sure that they're allocating funds for programs like the Area Agency on Aging, Adult Protective Services, programs that have the focus of older and dependent adults in mind. The other way is locally to make sure that our board of supervisors is funding programs for older adults, and the needs of older adults have changed over the last couple of decades. We come across a lot of clients when you talk about going to an active adult center, they don't want that as an option. So maybe making new types of activities for older adults that they find enjoyable, maybe whether that's dancing or other types of activities that they find meaningful and enjoyable, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of that available in all parts of the county. And then also transportation, that's a really big one for older adults. Losing that license is just almost like a mental death sentence for a lot of older adults. That's their independence. They don't want to be a burden to their children. They don't want to be a burden to the community. So having, having good means of transportation to get, besides just going to the doctor's office, maybe going out to do social activities and having that be really accessible for older adults should be a priority. So letting the Board of Supervisors in your district know that and fund that and make that a priority would be really important to do.
Yes, I agree with that completely. I think Carey answered this question kind of on a macro scale very well. I wouldn't add anything. On a more individual level, I think prevention is key. We're lucky that we have victim advocates who can go out into the community and talk about prevention, but it's so important because small steps can prevent huge crimes. For example, hiring a professional fiduciary to just keep an eye on someone's finances can prevent someone from losing their life savings. Putting in what we call a springing power of attorney document. In other words, when somebody eventually may lose mental capacity to manage their finances, there's somebody in place who's legally entitled to take over, to take care of that person. Those are just a couple examples. Other preventative measures that maybe aren't so legal, surveillance cameras, very, very easy. Having an online bank account that you can have a trusted friend or family member keeping an eye on just to make sure that there isn't anything fishy going on. So preventative measures are really key to preventing and decreasing rates of elder abuse. And then the last thing again is reporting. Any suspected elder abuse, report.
So keep your eyes and ears open. Yeah.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you for answering our questions on elder abuse. Since we have some time, I thought I'd open it up to the audience. But let's keep the questions general in nature. Don't be specific. And don't disclose any personal information.
In the beginning, you talked specifically about the adult protective services, and that goes to age 62. And then you started talking about the elder abuse. Do you handle both?
Do you want to start?
So yes, we handle elder and dependent adult abuse in adult protective services. So anybody between the ages of 18 and 59 that has a disability where they can't make decisions or they can't care for themselves. A really good example might be a severe brain injury that's left them really incapacitated. They can't manage their finances. They can't direct their medical care services. We would see a client in that age range. And then anybody over the age of 60 now in APS, they are considered an elder. It's a little different for the penal code at 65 and over still. That didn't change for them, but it did for APS. So we see both.
Okay, and so if somebody's, let's say, 60, like I live in Leisure Village, I'm sure you know.
Oh yes, we know it well.
So, I mean, there's so many people there that have caregivers and
Right.
such. If I know of someone who does not have a family member, I mean, who do I contact to protect them?
So you would want to start with adult protective services. The key is it can't be because necessarily they don't have a support system per se, although you could make it for that, but there really has to be what we call a protective issue. So the lack of the family member, how is that causing a detrimental impact to that person? So maybe in your example, it might be they're not getting to the doctor's appointments or they're canceling a lot because they don't have transportation to get there. We would consider that self-neglect, and we would actually open a case and go out and see that person and say, checking in on you to see if you need some services, can we talk with you for a while, and then try to connect them to whatever sorts of social supports exist in the community. So I feel like the starting point is adult protective services, because even if it's not more of a criminal nature where Alexa's office would need to be involved, maybe it's more of a social support issue, we're very well equipped to help in a case like that.
Okay, and then if they are over 65, they would contact the...
Still be adult protective services. We'll see people up to 100, 102. There's no limit. We had a 106-year-old recently. That was a real rare occasion. But yeah, anybody over the age of 18, again, that's got that severe disability, yes. Sure.
Clarify your role that your clients must live in the community, not in a licensed healthcare facility.
That's generally true, I would say 99% of the time. The exception might be this that we see. If there's financial abuse from someone outside of the healthcare setting. So the client is, whether it's permanently residing or temporarily residing in some kind of level of care, boarding care, assisted living, or skilled nursing facility, but the person on the outside of that facility could be a son or daughter, granddaughter, grandson, they're financially abusing, we're still going to go into that facility to see the client because the perpetrator is on the outside, not a staff member of the facility. Otherwise, that's like the Ombudsman, Community Care Licensing, or California Department of Public Health. So generally speaking, that's true. That's the one caveat I would say is the financial abuse.
Okay. Yes.
How does dementia play into this, especially early stages? Somebody with dementia who can get by the system for the most part, and they report something. How does this play into it?
It's a great question. Something that we do as a means of an assessment is we, with the client's permission, of course they have to want to participate, but we offer the Montreal Cognitive Assessment as a screening tool. It's a little bit more enhanced than the mini mental that maybe a lot of you have heard about, and it picks up on that mild cognitive impairment that you're referencing, where they can present really well, but maybe they're involved in a scam and you're wondering, why are they doing this? They seem very well put together, they can answer questions, they're coherent, but yet they wired $10,000 to this person they've never met, right? The Montreal Cognitive Assessment, it's a 10-minute quick screening tool. It picks up on that. So how we kind of try to get the clients buy-in to participate in that, we don't ever call it a test. It's a tool. It's never a test. No one wants to take a test. And so we try to let them know, this could be really something valuable for your doctor. They could kind of track your progress, from time to time. And this gives you a good indicator of how you're doing, and if you needed some more supports for your memory, then you could talk to your doctor about that. A lot of the time, that's a successful approach. How that plays into adult protective services is if they've got the mild impairment, we're going to flag the fact that they're at risk, but they still have the right to tell us no. To get someone conserved, for example, it's the highest standard. It has to be severe impairment where the doctor, a medical professional, is saying this person lacks capacity, they can't make these decisions anymore, and then the judge is ordering whether that's a private conservator in the community, if they have a sizable estate, let's say, or it's the local public guardian's office that for someone who's a little bit more indigent or lacks assets. So it's tough, it's a high bar. Sometimes we see years, people for over a period of years before something like a conservatorship can be established, or we're seeing them for years and we're watching their cognitive capacity decline over that period of time until their guard is down, let's just say, and their defenses are a little bit more lowered and they're more willing to let us in. And then we have more latitude in adult protective services. If we know or suspect that someone lacks capacity, even if the client tells us no, we're going to proceed to what we feel is in the client's best interest until basically a court says yes, they need to be conserved, or nope, they don't meet the threshold and they're free to continue living their lives and making their own decisions.
I think to add to that, well, someone is lucid enough to understand the risk of fraud, especially today with all the online fraud, even phone scams. While they're lucid enough to understand the risk and how sophisticated these scammers are, it's a good opportunity to get legal paperwork in place. For example, a springing power of attorney, or even just adding a trusted family member on their bank account as another authorized user, and then they can just periodically check their online bank accounts. Sometimes we see situations where people have been victimized. Cases come into my office and that person does have dementia, and the abusers, I guess their defense is, well, this person consented to giving me $50,000. This was a loan. But it's very clear that that person didn't have the cognitive capacity to do that. If there's enough evidence for us to show that that abuser either knew or should have known that that victim lacked the cognitive capacity to give meaningful consent, then we can file a case. But that's very difficult. Usually it'll have to be a caregiver who was involved in daily chores, daily caring for them. So of course they would have known what their cognitive capabilities were.
Yes.
If you have enough corroborating evidence of a crime, even if the victim does not want you to file charges, do you still pursue that?
Usually, yes. I won't say always, but very often we do. A lot of times, this is a trend amongst all domestic violence cases. And when I say domestic violence, I mean any familial relationship. So that elder abuse is kind of a subcategory in domestic violence. Just also another side note, elder abuse can be among strangers too. But in situations where there are family dynamics, very often, even if the victims are cooperative initially, because the court process takes a little bit of time, sometimes months, sometimes years, the emergency wears off, the urgency to get help, and then other emotions creep in, guilt that they're turning their son or daughter in, that they could be the reason that their son or daughter goes to jail or has to be on probation, or really they just don't have time to be a part of this process. They don't want to keep getting calls from my office hearing that their subpoena has been trailed to another date. And so very often we will continue with prosecution or even file when victims don't want to protect themselves, but we see the need to step in.
Yes.
Is the FAST team still operational?
It's still operational, and we're so fortunate. Our current facilitator is our retired victim advocate, and she's phenomenal. So I know she'll have to retire at some point. She's 70 years old, but she'll be sorely missed when she does. We meet once a month. It's dark. The meetings are dark in June and in December.
Could you explain what FAST is?
Yeah, so FAST stands for the Financial Abuse Specialist Team. So really it's what they call a multidisciplinary team, experts from different disciplines coming together to assist Adult Protective Services with resolving some of our most difficult financial abuse cases. So oftentimes the cases that we bring to a group like this would be, maybe multiple perpetrators involved, or lots of real estate involved, or maybe legal issues that our staff aren't really well trained or equipped to handle, and getting an expert opinion. Alexa's a member of that meeting as well, from the legal disciplinary perspective.
And just to add to that, we actually have a few different multidisciplinary teams, we call them. And what that means essentially is a group of people coming from different agencies, from different perspectives, who work together to kind of try and facilitate a coordinated response and just have the strongest and most widespread impact that we can. Actually, APS has bi-weekly meetings where we talk about open cases, and people from different organizations such as victim advocates, DAs, people from even real estate areas. We all contribute and try and help solve these situations and work towards a positive outcome.
Okay, any other questions?
Mine's financial. I had a question. Is there an association that I can talk to or send something to about where a credit union does not pay interest on a CD?
There should be, I'm going to look into that and I'll get an answer for you. There should be
The national, the one that regulates
National
the credit
Fraud
union,
Hotline?
the one that regulates credit unions. Is that the one maybe he's talking about?
Probably. Let us look into that. We'll give you an answer before.
My ears.
Oh, sure. Let us look into that. We'll give you a phone number to report to. Yes.
Okay, Jay?
Reinforce again the fact that if you have a loved one or a friend or whatever in a licensed health facility, which includes board care, assisted living, and skilled nursing, in that building is a big poster that gives the phone number and address and information about reporting complaints that could include abuse as it relates, which is outside of the initial purview of Adult Protective Services. It's in a facility.
Right. Yes, so absolutely. The ombudsman, I call them the APS of facilities. You definitely would want to start there and make a report there. But there's two licensing agencies that manages licensed care. Community care licensing manages those residential care homes known as board and cares, and then assisted living facilities. If it's more like a hospital setting, like a skilled nursing setting, that's the California Department of Public Health. The good thing is APS is a no wrong door place, because we get lots of those reports. People just automatically think that we investigate those things. Even when we don't, we'll make sure that they get to the appropriate agency. So many, many times per week, I can't even tell you how many times per year, we're constantly relocating those reports to the proper licensing agency. So if you leave here today and you forget, where am I supposed to send that report about the facility again? You can always send it to Adult Protective Services, call the hotline. We'll make sure it gets to where it needs to go, even though we don't personally investigate those reports.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for your time and expertise. We appreciate it. I just wanted to remind the audience that on August 21st is our next in this series. It's called Nursing Homes, What You Need to Know. So we hope to see you then. Please register in advance at the Camarillo Health Care District, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.